Welcome to the programme. Well, we begin our conversation in Egypt after we heard there in the news those 3 car bombs exploded, killing 5 people and injuring 90 people. A group inspired by Al-Qaeda has claimed responsibility for one of the attacks. Well, we'll be speaking to Egyptians in Cairo on the eve of the anniversary of the 2011 uprising. Plus, the Syrian government has threatened to quit peace talks in Geneva if serious discussions with the opposition don't start by tomorrow. We'll discuss whether this is the last chance for peace. Wherever you're watching around the world, you can get in touch across social media or upload a video at worldhaveyoursay.com.
Talking about it. Top priority.
I experience.
This is chaos. People are going to want to know.
Let me say something.
Welcome to World Have Your Say. Good to have your company. We're going to start our conversation in Egypt about those 3 explosions, which it looks like were targeting police in Cairo. Let me introduce you to 3 guests who are going to discuss that with us. We're joined by Safar Faisal from BBC Arabic. We're also joined by Timothy Kaldas, who is Professor of Politics at Nile University in Cairo. But first, let's speak to Heidi, who joins us via Skype in Cairo. And Heidi, I understand that you are actually quite close to one of the explosions today.
Yes, actually what happened, I'm actually closer to the second explosion that happened today at the metro station in a neighborhood called Doki. That's quite close to my house, just 10 minutes away. But even the first explosion, I was able to hear it. I was up at 6 a.m., which is really early for Friday morning. And I was able to hear a very, very loud explosion, and well, turned out a few minutes later that it was the first explosion that detonated in downtown Cairo.
It certainly appears like these were coordinated attacks. When people watch from the outside, they've seen trouble, they've seen protests in Egypt in recent weeks, but were you surprised by this coordinated attack today?
Actually, yes. Well, I did expect some violence, some demonstrations to be going on, some uprising, but I honestly did not believe that it would be such an organized thread of bombings that would be going on, and especially with the first one, it was really massive. You could hear it all across the city, and so many people had heard it. That was quite unexpected, I have to say.
Well, Heidi, let me introduce you to Timothy Kaldas, who is also joining us here on World Have Your Say. Do you see this as a new strategy or an extension of the violence that we've seen in recent weeks in Egypt?
I would say it's a continuation and a continued escalation of the violence that we've been seeing over the past few months. And it's unfortunately predictable. What's taking place is that the calculus of politics has gone from a calculus oriented around mass mobilization to a calculus that is taking a more warlike orientation, and the consequence of that is that people are increasingly turning to violence to achieve their political goals.
Let's bring in Safar Faisal from BBC Arabic. What sort of comments are you getting coming in from your viewers, your listeners, about the attack in Egypt today?
There is obviously loads of anger amongst the people. Even some people think that the government is so lenient with those people. They haven't brought anybody to justice up till now in the previous bombings that happened in Egypt, in Daqaliya and Mansoura and other places in Sinai as well. So there is a bit of anger, but there is definitely a sense of shock. We have to understand that the big target was Mudiriyat Amn al-Qahira, which is a security area and which could be the most secure police building in the whole Cairo. So they felt that there is this had hit the target very hard, and it's obviously very much directed to the authorities, and it meant to give a clear message that we will continue what we are doing, and we still haven't heard from you who is behind this. So there is a bit of shock and anger. As Heidi said, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. That's Friday morning, which usually a day off. It's very quiet in Cairo, and nobody expected. And if we can check this area as well, there is loads of security around the building, where 5 people has been killed and almost 70 has been injured. So there is a big question mark. How come like a half a ton of explosions, as the police themselves said, has been getting through this area, which is very busy area in the heart of Cairo?
Well, Safar, let's put that point to Mohammed Kairat, who's editor of the publication Egypt Streets, also on Skype from Cairo. Picking up on what Safar says, is the most shocking element of these attacks today the fact that they managed to penetrate what is deemed a very secure part of the city?
I think the bigger shock is that they've started targeting civilian targets. Just now, actually, I'm receiving reports that there was a 4th explosion on Al-Haram Street outside a cinema that has killed 1 civilian, apparently. I think this represents a bigger escalation than simply targeting, security departments, etc. However, it is worrying that, the Cairo Security Directorate, one of the most secure places, was able to be penetrated in such a way.
I'm keen for you each to speak to one another and have a conversation. Heidi, I wonder if you want to speak to Mohammed about your concerns in your city.
Yes, I was just checking Twitter a few minutes ago, and I knew that there are clashes just next to my house, and it's definitely shocking to hear what Mohammed was saying about them targeting cinemas. I thought, well, if we're staying home today, would be fine, and I really have concerns how it will be in the next few days, if things are going to de-escalate, or if this is going to be a wave of violence and attacks that are going to be, going on for a while.
I personally think that in the coming days, we might see a bit more bloodshed and violence, but overall, in the bigger picture, I think we're moving towards stability. I don't think today's attacks will represent a huge change in what we've seen in the past few months, and that hopefully the country, will stabilize.
Hopefully.
Timothy, I can see you're trying to come in.
Yes. I disagree with Mohammed on that point. I think that actually we're moving in a direction where we're probably going to see more violence, unfortunately, in this coming year. And another very troubling thing is that there have been clashes in Dakhleya between civilians. And that sort of tension playing out among civilians in which they're engaging in violence against one another is a very troubling trend to emerge. And we've seen it in multiple protests over the past several months and even the past few years. And the fact that at times the security forces leave civilians to engage in those clashes is a dangerous trend as well, as people kind of grow accustomed to taking matters into their own hands. So I don't have a lot of optimism about the violence coming under control in the next several months.
I personally think that, this isn't necessarily anything new. We've seen violence between people and people over the past few months. I think the biggest sign of whether the people are afraid and whether they feel that the country is becoming too insecure will be tomorrow, and whether people will answer the call of the Minister of Interior and take to the streets in the millions as he, asked the people to do so. If indeed that they do take to the streets, that's a symbol of resilience, I guess.
Yes, but resilience doesn't prevent the continuation of violence.
Timothy, you go ahead, and then Heidi, you follow. Go ahead, Timothy.
The resilience of the people, I don't doubt. The fact that they'll be taking to the streets in large numbers tomorrow is very likely, but that doesn't prevent the continuation of violence, which is what I'm worried about. We've seen massive demonstrations supporting the government before, but that hasn't prevented violence from continuing to take place and very deadly attacks taking place. I think that those are two separate questions.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Timothy, but what I found really astonishing today was the courage of the people. Like a few minutes after the blast, people went down to the sites and were demonstrating, and they were showing their support for the policemen who got killed. So I thought that was really brave, and people tried to show we will not back down, we will not be terrorized by bombings or terrorism in general, which was really a very touching spirit.
I agree with
That's an
Heidi.
ongoing thing that we've observed.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay. I'm just saying that that's an ongoing thing we've observed, people being able to face violence and stand up to it and demonstrate. We saw it in the 18 days of 2011 when the police visited enormous amounts of violence on protesters, killing 1,000 people and wounding many more. And I don't think that that's going to go away. But I do worry about the likelihood of a continued and escalating level of violence.
I think the bigger violence that we should worry about should be the violence between, as they call the Muslim Brotherhood supporters and locals. In the past few months, we've seen dozens killed almost every week, yet the Egyptian public has almost ignored it. I feel that this is very dangerous in the overall scheme of things, but that the continued violence is actually harming the Muslim Brotherhood more than it is harming the interim government.
Well, as we speak, and as you alluded to a few minutes ago, Mohammed, we are getting those reports now. Egyptian state TV saying that a fourth explosion has gone off near a cinema in the capital. One person is reported dead at the moment. We've got a statement from the Egyptian presidency regarding the attacks. This came out before news of that fourth bombing broke. The presidency reiterates that no act, however grave, will determine the nation's drive to democracy. We will be steadfast in the face of all those trying to spread terror in the hearts and minds of the people of this proud nation. And we will not rest until we secure stability throughout this great land. That statement from the Egyptian presidency this morning. I wonder, all three of you, as you look back to the events of 2011, we understand, of course, tomorrow is the third anniversary of the toppling of President Morsi. What on earth did you think would be the situation in your country 3 years on? Presumably none of you thought you would be in the situation where you're gripped by violence in Cairo as you are today. Heidi, maybe you could give us your assessment.
I didn't really. I expected a wave of demonstrations that was going on for the past 2 years, but I honestly did not believe that we would be at this stage where we'd be facing bombings. The violence on the street is totally understandable. You have people getting acquainted with the core principles of democracy, learning where the threshold between rules and regulations and freedom of speech and how to respect others, that's all pretty new to the Egyptian society, or in general the Arab world. So it was kind of expected, but I personally did not think that we would reach a level where we'd be at a crisis state similar to Iraq or Syria, where we'd be facing that severe bombings and that severe bloodshed. That was honestly not something I was expecting.
What about you, Timothy? Briefly, if you would, 3 years on since President Mubarak was overthrown, did you think your country would be in this situation?
I mean, I expected it to be a very bumpy ride, and I actually expected that the Brotherhood would do quite well in upcoming elections. I didn't expect us to reach this point of violence, and I didn't expect the security apparatus to retake control of the state to the extent that it has. Those have been unfortunate turns of events. Beyond that, I'm mostly just hoping that we can kind of reach a point where we can find a way out of this crisis. The trouble is right now that there are groups of people who believe that they have no access to political power by institutional means anymore. And that doesn't justify any of the acts of violence that have taken place. I condemn all of those. But it does help us understand our situation, and it's something that we have to find a solution to. We have to find a way to at least encourage normal rank and file people who do support Islamist causes to find a way into a conversation that ends with us having
Timothy, that's getting really scratchy. A brief final thought from you, Mohammed, if you would.
I felt that, on January 25, young Egyptians all came out in support of a common goal and a vision, but that in 3 years' time, this all changed, with the Muslim Brotherhood first taking control and then losing control. I definitely did not expect us to be in this kind of violence, but I do believe that, we are moving towards a brighter future.
Heidi, Mohammed and Timothy, thank you all for joining us here on World Have Your Say. We're going to take a quick break and then be switching our attention to those peace talks in Syria.
No, I absolutely talking about it. Jen, let me say something.
Welcome back to World Have Your Say. We're going to switch our attention now to the Syrian peace talks taking place in Geneva. Many people ahead of those talks didn't hold out much hope of much success, with both the opposition and the Syrian government having very deeply divided thoughts on the way forward. We understand the Syrian government, of course, is saying that it will pull out of those talks unless serious discussions take place before tomorrow. We've been receiving videos from you throughout the day, and this one has come from a Syrian protesting outside the UN buildings in Geneva. Let's take a look.
Hi, this is Leila in front of the United Nations with people demonstrating from the opposition for the Geneva II talks. So the goal of this demonstration is to make heard the voices of the Syrian people in the struggle for their rights. So we think that Geneva II talks must lead to the defense of the aspirations of the Syrian people for freedom, social justice, dignity and democracy. We think that these legitimate claims must be the basics for negotiations in order to end the extreme suffering of the Syrian people. Thus, the issue of these talks can be an unacceptable power-sharing arrangement.
Well, that was a video that we received from a Syrian protester outside those talks at the UN in Geneva. Let me introduce you to three guests who are here to speak with us. We're still joined by our BBC Arabic colleague Safar. Also joining us is Ken Sofer, who is in Washington. He's a research associate for the Center for American Progress. But first, let's speak to Zenia, who is a Syrian student living in Berlin. Zenia, welcome to World Have Your Say. There's some discussion online about whether this is the last chance for peace for Syria. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is a pretty interesting question, and it's a really hard question. I know many Syrians who do believe in peace for Syria with these speeches, and I know also many Syrians who don't believe in these talks. But in my opinion, I think it's a big step forward for Syria, but not as big for peace. Where I followed the conference online, and to be honest, I was pretty disappointed because well, they blamed each other and they sum up everything about Syria, and they didn't came to a conclusion. They just blamed each other, and they didn't really talk about how to stop the violence. And I think it's the first step to help the Syrian people, the Syrians who are in need. Well, we know over 100,000 Syrians have been killed by the Assad regime, and to blaming each other is not a solution. We need to stop the violence and to help the Syrian refugees, and we know 2 million refugees are now in the neighbor countries, and they are suffering, and they need medicine, and starvation is rolling the country, and we need the help of the world to help these people in need and to stop the violence and to stop the transport of the weapons. And I think the conference came up too late, way too late. They have to become. They should start. They should start with the conference in the beginning of the revolution and in the beginning.
Okay, well, Zenia, I guess there's no point looking back to that, because of course the conference didn't start at the beginning of the revolution. We are where we are now, and I know that both Ken and Safar were nodding at various points throughout that. Safar, maybe you can bring us some of the views from your audience. One of the problems we always have here on World Have Your Say is the Syrian opposition is very vocal. It's also English speaking. It's very difficult for us to get people to come on air speaking in English to explain the pro-government line. Maybe you can explain some of that for us.
Unfortunately, there is loads of security issues around speaking to people from inside Syria, and we have in Arabic service as well having the same problem. However, we manage many times to speak to people via Skype and otherwise, and we know for sure that many of the people who speaks to our colleagues inside Syria, that there wasn't too much hope of securing anything from Geneva II. However, the people really admitted the fact that when the opposition sitting together with the government, there is a big step forward. So there has been loads of maybe, I would say, hope that there will be a conclusion eventually, which is unfortunately this morning have been disappearing. And our colleague in Geneva has been reflecting more of somber mood and loads of like threatening from the government side that they will pull out from Geneva. We have to understand the refugees as well in Lebanon. These are the people that we managed to get through and we managed to speak to in the last few days. Unfortunately, they feel so distressed about this Geneva talks. They think the whole world, not only the Syrian government and the Syrian opposition, has forgot all about them and they became just numbers in the middle of nowhere. But we have to admit to the fact that having the opposition on board, people think about it as a step forward. I think the whole issue now about Bashar Assad's regime, and the big question, are they able to continue and I mean, be on the scene in Syria? Obviously, this is out of question from the opposition and Saudi and Washington as well on side. On the other hand, we have Syrian regime saying, we do still have legitimacy, and behind them as well, Russia, which is like a big player in the scene in Syria as well. We have to remember they have to take Bashar al-Assad off the loop with the chemical scenario. So there is loads of diplomacy, but at the back of the mind of the ordinary Syrians, they feel that probably nothing will change.
Well, as we speak here, it's being reported on the news wires that the international mediator at those talks in Geneva has actually started talks with the Syrian opposition. If we get any update on any movement, we will bring it to you here on World Have Your Say. We don't have much time left at the moment, Ken, but I'd be interested to get your thoughts on whether you think this really is the last chance for peace for Syria.
To be honest, I think that Geneva II is the first step in a very long process towards peace, and I know that doesn't, provide very positive feelings for the folks that are in Syria that are having to deal with the civil war. But I still think that the opposition, the regime, are way too far away from reaching a conclusion. The opposition's main demand is that President Assad needs to step down. The Assad regime has basically said that we're not even willing to discuss that at the talk. So it really kind of calls into question what they're talking about. I think that the most positive benefit that Geneva II allows is it allows some of the international mediators, the United States and Russia, to basically talk and
stay with us, we'll carry on talking.
Let's just say something.
Day of Syrian peace talks in Geneva. While some observers are taking heart that neither side has walked out, the Syrian government touch with us from all around the world. Shazmuddin in Nigeria has got in touch on WhatsApp to say in a situation like this, President Assad needs to leave. It's the only way that Syrians can have peace. And Ali in Sudan has picked up the phone and given us a call to say the solution is bringing both sides together to sit and talk this through. That's certainly what they're trying to do in Geneva at the moment. No face-to-face talks going ahead, but we'll keep you updated on how the talks are going. Stay with us on World Have Your Say.
No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something. I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something.
Welcome back.